The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust on the sun-baked road as Josephine Clark clutched her wedding dress in trembling hands, tears threatening to spill from her red-rimmed eyes. It was 1875, and the promised land of California that was supposed to bring her a new beginning now seemed like nothing but a cruel joke. Her fiancé's letter had been waiting for her at the last stop. He'd found someone else during her long journey west and would not be meeting her as arranged. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the driver called out, "Wasco coming up, folks." The small California settlement emerged on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings shimmering in the heat. Josephine dabbed at her eyes with an already damp handkerchief, smoothing down her travel-worn blue dress. The wedding gown she'd sewn by hand remained folded in her trunk, destined never to be worn. "First time in Wasco, miss?" asked the elderly woman sitting across from her. "Yes," Josephine replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I fear I won't be staying long. No family here, no one at all." The words caught in her throat. At 22, she'd left everything behind in Boston, her widowed mother's grave, the seamstress shop where she'd worked since she was 15, and the security of familiar streets, all for a man who had promised her love through his letters, only to retract it when she was most vulnerable. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Wasco Hotel, a two-story wooden structure that had seen better days. The driver opened the door, offering his hand to help the passengers descend. "I need to find work immediately," Josephine murmured to herself as her feet touched the dusty ground. She had enough money for perhaps 3 nights at the hotel, and then she would be destitute in a town where she knew no one. As the driver unloaded her trunk, a commotion down the street caught everyone's attention. A man on horseback was racing toward them, pursued by 2 others. His hat flew off, revealing dark hair as he leaned forward in the saddle. "Move!" he shouted as he approached, but there was nowhere for Josephine to go. Her trunk blocked her path back to the stagecoach, and the horse was bearing down on her. In the split second before impact, strong hands gripped her waist, pulling her out of harm's way. She tumbled against a broad chest as the horse thundered past, its rider throwing an apologetic glance over his shoulder. "Are you hurt, madam?" A deep voice rumbled above her. Josephine looked up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face. The man who held her wore a dusty hat, a faded blue shirt, and had the unmistakable look of a cowboy about him. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, suddenly aware of his hand still on her waist. She stepped back, smoothing her skirts. "Cole Blackburn," he said, tipping his hat, "and you'd be the bride they've been talking about." Josephine blinked in surprise. "How did you, small town?" he replied with a crooked smile. "News travels fast. Especially when it's about a Boston lady coming to marry Fred Winters." Her cheeks burned with humiliation. "I see the news of my arrival preceded me. Has the news of Mr. Winters' change of heart also made the rounds?" Cole's expression softened. "Afraid so, madam." "Fred's not known for his constancy." He glanced at her trunk. "Let me help you with that." "Thank you, but I can manage," she said, her pride still stinging. "I insist." He easily lifted the heavy trunk. "Where to?" "The hotel, please, just until I decide what to do next." As they walked the short distance to the hotel entrance, Josephine felt curious eyes following them. A mail-order bride left at the altar was clearly the most interesting thing to happen in Wasco in some time. "What brings you to town, Mr. Blackburn?" she asked, trying to deflect attention from her own circumstances. "I run the Double B Ranch about 5 miles out. Just came in for supplies." He set her trunk down in the hotel lobby, and to see about hiring some help, lost 2 hands to the gold fever up north. The hotel clerk, A thin man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from his ledger. "Room for the lady." "Yes, please," Josephine said, opening her reticule to pay. Cole cleared his throat. "Madam, if you're looking for work, my sister's been in need of help at the ranch house. She's running herself ragged trying to cook and keep house for me and the hands." Josephine hesitated, unsure if she should trust this offer from a stranger, but something in his straightforward gaze gave her pause. "That's very kind, but it's honest work, Miss Clark. Room and board plus wages. My sister would be mighty glad of the company, too." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking less sure of himself. "Just an offer to consider, no rush to decide." The hotel clerk raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the exchange. Josephine realized that staying in town meant being the subject of gossip and pity. Perhaps the ranch would offer some respite while she figured out her next move. "May I meet your sister first?" she asked cautiously. Cole's face broke into a genuine smile. "Of course. She's at the general store now. I can introduce you." 10 minutes later, after securing her room and leaving her trunk with the clerk, Josephine found herself walking down Wasco's Main Street beside Cole Blackburn. The town was small but bustling, with a saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses lining the dusty street. Inside the general store, a woman with the same striking blue eyes as Cole was examining bolts of fabric. Her brown hair was neatly pinned up, and she wore a practical blue dress with a white apron. "Charlotte," Cole called, "got someone for you to meet." Charlotte Blackburn turned, her curious expression warming into a smile as Cole introduced Josephine and explained the situation with surprising tact. "We've heard about your predicament, Miss Clark, and I'm truly sorry for it," Charlotte said sincerely. "Fred Winters never did deserve a lady like yourself, if you don't mind my saying so." "I'm beginning to think the same," Josephine replied with a small smile. "I've been telling Miss Clark about our need for help at the ranch," Cole explained. Charlotte's eyes lit up. "Oh, that would be wonderful. I'm absolutely overwhelmed with the cooking and cleaning." "Do you cook, Miss Clark?" "I do, though perhaps not the kind of fair ranch hands might expect." "You can learn," Charlotte assured her, "and I'd be so grateful for the help and company. It gets lonesome being the only woman among so many men." Josephine considered her options. Stay in town, the subject of whispers and pity, spending her meager savings on hotel rooms while searching for work that might not exist, or accept this opportunity that had presented itself so unexpectedly. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "How about tomorrow?" Charlotte suggested eagerly. "Cole can come fetch you in the morning. That'll give you tonight to rest from your journey. And if it doesn't suit you after a week, I'll bring you back to town, no questions asked," Cole added. Josephine nodded slowly. "Very well. I accept your offer, Miss Blackburn. Charlotte, please. And I'm Josephine." As they finalized the arrangements, Josephine couldn't help but notice how Cole watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, a mixture of concern and something else in his eyes. For the first time since reading Frederick Winter's letter, she felt a flicker of something that wasn't despair. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was a step away from the abyss. That night, as she sat on the edge of the bed in her hotel room, Josephine unfolded her wedding dress and spread it across her lap. The ivory satin gleamed softly in the lamplight, tiny pearls sewn into the bodice catching the glow. She'd spent months making it, stitching her dreams into every seam. Now it represented nothing but broken promises and foolish trust. With a determined set to her jaw, Josephine carefully folded the dress and placed it back in her trunk. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, even if it wasn't the one she'd traveled 2,000 miles to find. True to his word, Cole arrived the next morning driving a wagon. He helped load her trunk and offered his hand as she climbed onto the seat beside him. The early morning air was cool, but Josephine knew the California sun would soon warm the day. "Did you sleep well?" Cole asked as he guided the horses out of town. "Well enough," she lied, not wanting to admit that she'd spent most of the night crying and then berating herself for her foolishness. As they left Wasco behind, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills covered in golden grass, dotted with oaks and pines. The mountains rose in the distance, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above. "It's beautiful," Josephine said softly. "That it is," Cole agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the landscape. He quickly turned his attention back to the road. "The ranch has been in my family for nearly 20 years. My pa came out from Kentucky in '56, during the gold rush, but he was smart enough to see that feeding miners was more reliable than finding gold. Started with just a few head of cattle and built from there. And your parents now," a shadow crossed his face, "lost them both 3 years ago. Influenza. Charlotte and I run the place now." "I'm sorry for your loss," Josephine said sincerely. "I lost my mother last year. My father passed when I was quite young." "It's not easy," Cole acknowledged. "Charlotte was just 19 when our parents died. I was 25 and already helping Pa run the ranch, but it was still a hard adjustment." As they continued their journey, Cole pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. Josephine found herself relaxing in his company, his straightforward manner and quiet strength a balm to her wounded pride. "May I ask something personal?" Cole said after a comfortable silence had fallen between them. "You may ask," Josephine replied cautiously. "What made you agree to marry a man you'd never met?" It was a fair question, though the answer was complicated. "My mother's illness took all our savings. After she died, I had nothing but debts and the skills of a seamstress. Frederick's letters were persuasive. He described California as a place where I could start anew, where we could build a life together." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I was naive." Cole's jaw tightened. "Fred Winters is a fool and worse, but his loss might be our gain." He glanced at her. "Charlotte hasn't had a friend since our parents died. She's been too busy trying to keep up with everything." "And what about you, Mr. Blackburn? No wife to help shoulder the burden?" His hands tightened on the reins. "Never found the time, or the right woman." The words hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. "Ranch keeps me busy enough." As they crested a small hill, Cole pointed ahead. "There it is, the Double B." Josephine gasped softly. The ranch spread out below them, a large 2-story house painted white with green shutters, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. Beyond, cattle grazed on the rolling grasslands that stretched toward distant mountains. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "It's home," Cole replied simply, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. As they approached, several men working near the barn raised their hands in greeting. Cole returned the gestures, then guided the wagon to the front of the house. "Charlotte should be inside," he said, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to help Josephine descend. The front door flew open before they reached it, and Charlotte hurried out, her face flushed with excitement. "You're here. I've been watching for you this past hour." "The lady had a trunk that weighs like it's full of bricks," Cole teased, going back to retrieve it from the wagon. "Books mostly," Josephine admitted. "I couldn't bear to leave them behind." Charlotte's eyes lit up. "You like to read? Oh, you must see Pa's library." He collected books whenever he could. It was his pride and joy. Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly spacious and well appointed. Though the furniture was sturdy and practical rather than fashionable, everything was clean and well maintained. Charlotte led Josephine upstairs to a pleasant bedroom with windows that looked out over the range island. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," Charlotte said anxiously. "It's not what you're used to, I expect, coming from Boston and all." "It's lovely," Josephine assured her, genuinely pleased with the sunny room with its patchwork quilt and cheerful curtains. Cole appeared in the doorway with her trunk. "Where do you want this?" "By the window, please," Josephine directed. As he set it down, their eyes met briefly, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding, perhaps, or the first tentative roots of connection. "I'll leave you ladies to get acquainted," Cole said, backing toward the door. "Got work to do. Supper at 6. "As always," Charlotte confirmed. When he was gone, she turned to Josephine with a smile. "My brother's not much for words, but he's the best man I know." "He's been very kind," Josephine agreed. "Now, let me show you around, and then we can talk about duties and such," Charlotte offered, clearly excited to have another woman in the house. The tour revealed a well-organized household, though Charlotte admitted she struggled to keep up with everything. "There are usually 8 to 10 hands to feed, plus Cole and me," she explained. "More during roundup and branding." "That's quite an undertaking," Josephine remarked, impressed by what the younger woman had been managing alone. "It's been overwhelming, to be honest," Charlotte confessed. "I'm so grateful you've come, even if the circumstances were, well, not what you hoped for." By the time they returned to the kitchen to begin preparing the evening meal, Josephine had a clearer understanding of what would be expected of her. The work would be hard, but straightforward: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general household management. Tasks not dissimilar from what she'd done in her mother's house, just on a larger scale. "Can you bake?" Charlotte asked hopefully as she showed Josephine the pantry. "Reasonably well," Josephine replied. "My mother taught me, though we rarely had the luxury of extra sugar or butter." "Oh, the men love pie above all things," Charlotte said with a laugh. "Cole especially has a weakness for apple pie. If you can make a decent one, he'll be your devoted servant for life." The mention of Cole brought color to Josephine's cheeks, which Charlotte didn't miss. Her eyes twinkled knowingly, but she said nothing more on the subject. That evening, Josephine helped serve supper to Cole and the ranch hands in the large dining room. The men were respectful, though curious about the newcomer. Cole introduced her simply as Miss Clark from Boston, who will be helping Charlotte with the house. If any of them knew she was the abandoned bride from town, they gave no indication. As the days passed, Josephine settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to help Charlotte prepare breakfast for the men, spent the mornings cleaning and doing laundry, and the afternoons baking and preparing the evening meal. It was hard work, but satisfying, and she found herself sleeping soundly each night, too exhausted to dwell on her broken engagement. Cole was often absent from the house, busy with the 1,000 tasks that running a cattle ranch required, but Josephine was always aware of his presence. He never failed to thank her for the meals, his blue eyes warming when she placed a plate before him. When he discovered her reading one evening in his father's library, he began recommending his favorite books from the collection. Gradually, Josephine found her spirits lifting. Charlotte became the friend she'd never had, the sister she'd always wanted. The ranch hands treated her with respect, appreciating her cooking and the little touches she brought to the house: fresh wildflowers on the dining table, curtains washed and mended, floors that gleamed with polish. A month after her arrival, Josephine was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard hoofbeats. Cole rode up, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Josephine," he called, dismounting quickly. "Have you seen Charlotte?" The urgency in his voice alarmed her. "She went to gather eggs." "What's wrong?" Word from town. Fred Winters has been telling folks he's changed his mind again, says he wants to talk to you. Cole's expression was thunderous. The man has no shame. Josephine's hand stilled on the wet sheet she was hanging. I see. You don't have to see him, Cole said quickly. I can send him packing if he shows his face here. She studied Cole's face, the concern in his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. In that moment, Josephine realized something had shifted inside her. The thought of Frederick Winters no longer brought pain or humiliation, only a distant pity for the man who had so casually discarded her. Thank you, she said softly, but if he comes, I can handle it. Cole stepped closer, his voice dropping. Josephine, you should know. We've all grown fond of having you here. Charlotte is happier than I've seen her in years. And he broke off, seeming to struggle for words. And you, she prompted gently. I'd hate to see you hurt again, he finished, though she sensed that wasn't what he'd intended to say. Before she could respond, Charlotte appeared around the corner of the house, carrying a basket of eggs. She stopped when she saw them standing close together, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Am I interrupting? She asked innocently. Just warning Josephine that Fred Winters might come calling, Cole said, stepping back. Charlotte's expression darkened. That scoundrel. He's not setting foot in this house if I have anything to say about it. Let's not borrow trouble, Josephine said pragmatically. He may not come at all. But Frederick Winters did come, 2 days later, riding up to the ranch house in the middle of the afternoon. Josephine was alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, when she heard a horse approaching. Looking out the window, she recognized the slender figure dismounting at the hitching post. Her heart beat faster, but not from anticipation or longing. Taking a deep breath, she wiped her hands on her apron and went to the front door. Frederick Winters was much as she'd imagined from his letters, handsome in a conventional way, with light brown hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. He removed his hat when he saw her, a practiced smile appearing on his face. Josephine, he said, stepping forward. At last we meet. Mr. Winters, she replied coolly, remaining in the doorway. What brings you here? His smile faltered slightly at her tone. I've come to apologize, of course. I behaved abominably, letting you travel all this way only to... He spread his hands in a gesture of contrition. I was a fool, influenced by momentary weakness. I've come to make amends, to ask if you might still consider becoming my wife. The words that would have meant everything to her a month ago now rang hollow. Looking at Frederick, Josephine saw only a shallow man who changed direction with the wind. That won't be possible, Mr. Winters, she said firmly. I'm no longer available. Frederick blinked in surprise. But surely, is there a problem here? Cole's deep voice came from behind Frederick. He'd approached silently from the barn, his expression grim as he sized up the visitor. No problem, Josephine assured him, feeling a rush of warmth at his protective presence. Mr. Winters was just leaving. Frederick looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. I see. You work quickly, Blackburn. Cole's eyes narrowed dangerously. I suggest you get back on your horse and ride away, Winters. The ladies made her feelings clear. For a moment, it seemed Frederick might argue, but something in Cole's stance made him reconsider. He settled his hat back on his head with a forced smile. Of course. My apologies for the intrusion, Josephine. I wish you well. They watched in silence as he mounted and rode away. When he was out of earshot, Cole turned to Josephine. Are you all right? Perfectly fine, she assured him, and was surprised to realize it was true. Thank you for your timely arrival, though I had the situation well in hand. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I don't doubt it. You're a formidable woman, Josephine Clark, she laughed softly. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Cole cleared his throat. "I should get back to work." "And I have bread to finish," she agreed, though neither of them moved. "Josephine," Cole began hesitantly, "what you told Winters about not being available, was that just to get rid of him, or Cole, Miss Clark?" One of the ranch hands came running up, interrupting whatever Cole had been about to say. "Fire in the north pasture. Looks like lightning struck a tree. We need every hand." Cole's demeanor instantly shifted to alert authority. "Get the men and the water wagon. Josephine, tell Charlotte what's happening. Then both of you stay here. Keep watch for any sparks reaching the buildings." Without waiting for a response, he was gone, running toward the barn. Josephine hurried to find Charlotte, her heart pounding with fear for the ranch and for Cole. The next few hours were tense as Charlotte and Josephine watched the plume of smoke in the distance, preparing wet blankets and buckets of water in case the fire spread to the ranch buildings. It was late evening before the men returned, exhausted and smoke-stained but triumphant. "Got it contained," Cole reported, accepting the cup of water Josephine offered him with gratitude. "Lost about an acre of grazing land, but no cattle and no spread to the forest, thank God." "You should eat something," Josephine urged, noticing the fatigue lining his face. "I'll heat up some stew." Later, after the men had been fed and most had retired to the bunkhouse, Cole found Josephine on the front porch, gazing at the stars. He'd washed away the soot and smoke, his hair still damp from the basin. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, joining her at the railing. "I was thinking about how quickly things can change," she replied. "A month ago, I arrived in Wasco believing my life was over before it had really begun, and now, he prompted when she didn't continue. Josephine turned to face him. "Now I find myself grateful for Frederick's inconstancy. If he'd met me as promised, I would never have come here, never known what it's like to be truly valued for who I am rather than what I represent." Cole took a step closer. "And what do you represent to Frederick?" "A convenient wife, I suppose, someone to keep his house and bear his children, not a partner." She looked up at Cole, gathering her courage. "What about to you? What do I represent to you, Cole?" His expression softened, the moonlight casting shadows across his features. "Everything," he said simply. "You represent everything I didn't know I was waiting for." The honesty in his voice took her breath away. "Cole, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's only been a month and you came here with your heart broken. I don't expect anything. But I want you to know that as long as you want to stay at the Double B, there's a place for you. And if someday you might consider—" He faltered, then squared his shoulders. "If someday you might consider me as more than just your employer, I'd count myself the luckiest man in California." Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes, not from sadness but from a sudden, overwhelming joy. "I already do," she whispered. "Consider you more, that is." Cole's eyes widened, hope blooming in their blue depths. "You do?" Instead of answering with words, Josephine rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips gently to his. For a moment, Cole stood frozen in surprise. Then his arms came around her waist, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with tender reverence. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived," he admitted. Josephine laughed softly. "Even when I was a tearful, jilted bride, especially then. You looked so brave, holding yourself together despite everything. I admired your strength." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I still do." A comfortable silence fell between them as they stood together under the vast canopy of stars. The gentle sounds of the ranch at night surrounding them, the soft lowing of cattle in the distance, the rustle of wind in the oak trees, the chirping of crickets. "We should probably tell Charlotte," Cole said eventually, his hand finding Josephine's. "Tell me what?" Charlotte's voice came from the doorway, amusement evident in her tone. "That you two have finally admitted what everyone else has seen for weeks." They turned to find her leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed and a satisfied smile on her face. "You knew?" Cole asked, though he didn't release Josephine's hand. "Brother dear, I may be young, but I'm not blind," Charlotte laughed. "The way you two look at each other when you think no one's watching. It was just a matter of time." Her expression softened. "And I couldn't be happier. You both deserve some joy." With that, she disappeared back into the house, leaving them alone once more. "Well," Cole said with a chuckle, "I suppose we have her blessing." "It seems we do," Josephine agreed, leaning against his solid strength. "Cole, there's something I should tell you. When Frederick came today, I told him I wasn't available. That wasn't just to get rid of him, I meant it." Cole's arm tightened around her waist. "I'm glad to hear it." As summer turned to fall, Josephine and Cole's relationship deepened. They found moments together amidst the busy days, early morning walks before the ranch woke, quiet evenings in the library reading aloud to each other, Sunday afternoon rides to explore the rangeland. Cole taught Josephine to ride properly, patiently helping her overcome her fear of the large animals. In October, when the first cool breezes hinted at the coming winter, Cole took Josephine to his favorite spot on the ranch, a hilltop overlooking the valley, where an ancient oak spread its branches wide. They'd brought a picnic, and as they sat beneath the tree eating Charlotte's fried chicken and Josephine's apple pie, Cole grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Is something wrong?" Josephine asked, noting his distraction. "Just thinking," he replied, his fingers tracing patterns on the blanket between them. "About what?" He looked up, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "About how my life changed the day you arrived in Wasco. About how I never believed in love at first sight until I saw you standing there, looking lost but determined." "Cole," she murmured, touched by his words. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." Opening it, he revealed a simple gold ring with a small, perfect diamond. "It was my mother's. Pa gave it to her when they decided to come west together, to build a new life." Josephine's heart hammered in her chest as Cole took her hand. "Josephine Clark, I know it hasn't been long, but I love you with everything I am. You came here with no hope left, and somehow you gave me hope I never knew I needed." His voice roughened with emotion. "Marry me. We'll build dreams together, right here on this land." Tears filled Josephine's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Cole, I'll marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. "When?" he asked when they finally parted. "How soon can you be ready?" Josephine laughed at his eagerness. "Well, I do happen to have a wedding dress already made." Cole's expression sobered. "Are you sure you want to wear that? It doesn't hold painful memories." She considered this for a moment, then shook her head. "No. I made that dress for a dream, Cole. It just turns out the dream wasn't Frederick Winters. It was you. It was always meant to be you." They were married on the first Sunday in November, with the mountains dusted with early snow and the valley ablaze with autumn colors. The ceremony took place in the Wasco church, followed by a celebration at the Double B that brought together the entire community. Josephine wore her ivory satin dress, which Charlotte had helped her alter slightly to make it truly her own. As Cole led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, he whispered in her ear, "Happy, Mrs. Blackburn." "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully, marveling at how life could change so completely in the span of a few months. Later, after the guests had departed and Charlotte had tactfully retired to her room, Cole carried Josephine over the threshold of the master bedroom, which they'd spent the past week preparing together. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, and the old bed had been polished to a warm glow, dressed with new linens Josephine had ordered from San Francisco. "Welcome home," Cole said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "I've been home since the day you brought me here," Josephine replied, reaching up to touch his face. "This is just the beginning of our next chapter." Their first night as husband and wife was everything Josephine had dreamed of, tender, passionate, and filled with whispered promises for their future together. As she drifted to sleep in Cole's arms, she thought of how differently things might have turned out if Frederick Winters had kept his word. The thought no longer brought pain, only profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had led her to true love. The first year of marriage brought both joys and challenges. Winter descended on the valley with unexpected ferocity, testing the ranch's resources and the newcomers' resilience. Josephine learned what it meant to be a rancher's wife: the long hours, the constant work, the worry when Cole was out in bad weather. But she also discovered the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful together, of being a true partner rather than merely a wife. In spring, when the wildflowers carpeted the hills and new calves wobbled beside their mothers in the pastures, Josephine shared her own joyful news with Cole. Their family would grow by one come autumn. His reaction, stunned disbelief, followed by exultant joy, was something she would treasure forever. "Are you certain?" he asked, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday," she told him, laughing at his wonderstruck expression. "You're going to be a father, Cole Blackburn." He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as though she were light as a feather, his laughter joining hers. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Our baby." Charlotte was equally thrilled, immediately beginning to plan a nursery and knit tiny garments. "I'm going to be the best aunt in California," she declared. As Josephine's body changed with the advancing pregnancy, Cole's protectiveness increased tenfold. He insisted on hiring additional help for the house, overriding Josephine's protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing her duties. "You're growing our child," he told her firmly. "That's work enough." By summer, Josephine's condition was obvious, her rounded belly a source of pride for Cole, who seemed to find her more beautiful than ever. "You're glowing," he would tell her, his hands caressing the swell where their child grew. In late September, just as the leaves began to turn, Josephine went into labor. Cole paced the hallway outside their bedroom as the town's midwife and Charlotte attended to her, wincing at every cry of pain that escaped through the door. After 12 grueling hours, Charlotte emerged, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "Cole," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face, "you have a son." Cole's legs nearly gave way beneath him. "A son?" And Josephine, tired but well, "Go to them." Nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him. Josephine, her hair damp with sweat but her face transcendent with love as she cradled a tiny bundle wrapped in a white blanket. She looked up as he entered, her smile weak but joyful. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Cole approached the bed as though in a dream, perching carefully beside his wife. When she placed the infant in his arms, he felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his, and when he briefly opened his eyes, Cole caught a glimpse of deep blue. "He's perfect," Cole murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mother." "What shall we call him?" Josephine asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder to gaze down at their child. Cole thought for a moment. "What about James, after your father?" Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "James Thomas Blackburn," she suggested. "Thomas for your father. It's perfect, Cole agreed, gently kissing her forehead. Just like our family. Life settled into a new rhythm with baby James at its center. The little boy thrived, growing strong on his mother's milk and his father's adoration. Cole would often bring him out to the corrals, showing him the horses and cattle, telling him stories about the land that would one day be his. "You're going to spoil him," Josephine would tease, watching them together. "Probably," Cole would admit with a grin. "But he'll be a good man all the same." As James grew from infant to toddler, the Double B prospered under Cole's management. New land was purchased, the herd expanded, and modern improvements were made to the ranch house. Cole built Josephine a proper garden with raised beds for vegetables and flowers, and he added a wide veranda where they could sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over their land. Charlotte, ever the independent spirit, surprised them all by falling in love with the new schoolteacher who arrived in Wasco. Their wedding, held at the ranch 2 years after James's birth, was a joyous occasion that brought the community together once more. "Will you be lonely without Charlotte in the house?" Cole asked Josephine as they watched his sister dance with her new husband. "We have a 2-year-old tornado and another baby on the way," Josephine reminded him, patting her stomach where their second child grew. "I don't think loneliness is going to be a problem." Cole laughed, pulling her close. "True enough. Speaking of which, have you thought more about names? If it's a girl, I'd like to call her Elizabeth after your mother," Josephine said softly. "She would have loved you," Cole told her, his eyes soft with memory. "Almost as much as I do." Their daughter, Elizabeth Charlotte Blackburn, arrived in the spring, a delicate beauty with her mother's chestnut hair and her father's blue eyes. James, not quite 3, approached his baby sister with solemn curiosity that quickly blossomed into fierce protectiveness. "Mine," he declared, patting Elizabeth's tiny hand. "My sister." "That's right," Cole agreed, ruffling his son's dark hair. "And it's our job to take care of her, isn't it?" As the years passed, the Blackburn family grew and flourished. A third child, another boy they named William, completed their family. The 3 children filled the ranch house with laughter and occasional chaos, turning the once quiet home into a vibrant, bustling center of family life. Cole and Josephine's partnership deepened with each passing year. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and family illnesses, always finding strength in each other. Their love, born in unusual circumstances and nurtured through shared dreams, became the solid foundation upon which they built their lives. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Josephine with a special gift, a small, leather-bound journal. Inside, he'd written their story, from the day she arrived in Wasco with no hope left to the present day. "I want our children to know how we found each other," he explained as she turned the pages, tears filling her eyes at his heartfelt words. "How sometimes what seems like the end of everything is really just the beginning." Josephine closed the book and leaned across the table to kiss him, as much in love with this good, steady man as she had been that day beneath the oak tree when he'd proposed. And what a beautiful beginning it was. "The best part is," Cole said, taking her hand across the table, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Our story is still being written. Every day we're together." Later that evening, as they sat on the veranda watching their children play in the twilight, James, now a lanky 10-year-old, Elizabeth a spirited 7, and William an adventurous 5, Josephine leaned her head against Cole's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" she asked softly. "If Frederick had kept his word, if you hadn't been in town that day to offer me work." Cole considered this for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I think some things are meant to be, Josie." Maybe not in the way we expect or plan, but they find their way to us all the same. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You were always meant to come home to the Double B, to me. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Josephine thought about the frightened, heartbroken young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Wasco all those years ago, certain her life was over before it had truly begun. How wrong she had been. How wonderfully, beautifully wrong. I love you, Cole Blackburn, she whispered, turning her face up to his. Thank you for giving me back my hope when I needed it most. And I love you, Josephine Blackburn, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for building dreams with me. As their lips met in a tender kiss, their children's laughter echoing around them and their land stretching peaceful and prosperous in all directions, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this life they'd created together, was more than she could have ever dreamed of finding when she'd set out from Boston all those years ago. It wasn't the ending she had planned. It was something far better, a beginning that continued to unfold with each passing day, each season, each year shared with the man who had seen her at her lowest and offered not pity, but possibility. A future built on love, trust, and the courage to begin again. And as the stars continued to appear one by one in the vast California sky, Josephine made a silent promise to cherish every moment of the extraordinary life that had emerged from what had once seemed like her greatest disappointment. For in losing the future she thought she wanted, she had found the one she was always meant to have, with a man whose love had transformed her broken dreams into a reality more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. 20 years after Josephine had first arrived in Wasco, the Double B Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous operations in the San Joaquin Valley. The original ranch house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family and the frequent visits from Charlotte and her husband, who had 4 children of their own. James, now 20, had inherited his father's talent for ranching and was beginning to take on more responsibility, showing a keen mind for the business aspects that Cole had always found challenging. Elizabeth, 17, was the academic of the family, devouring books from her grandfather's library and dreaming of attending college in San Francisco. William, 15, was the free spirit, more interested in horses and adventure than formal education, though his quick intelligence was evident to anyone who spoke with him. On a warm evening in late spring, Cole and Josephine sat on their veranda, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Cole's hair was now streaked with silver at the temples, and fine lines marked the corners of Josephine's eyes, but they still looked at each other with the same love that had sustained them through 2 decades together. I had a letter from Frederick Winters today, Josephine said, breaking a comfortable silence. Cole raised an eyebrow. After all these years, what did he want? Nothing, really. He's passing through on his way to Oregon and wanted to know if he could visit. She handed Cole the letter. Apparently he's been widowed twice and is now on his 3rd marriage. Cole read the letter, his expression thoughtful. Do you want to see him? Josephine considered the question. I think I do, actually, not for any sentimental reason but to properly close that chapter. Besides, I'd like him to see what he missed out on. She smiled, gesturing to their beautiful home and land. What do you think? I think, Cole said slowly, that I'm secure enough in what we've built together to welcome the man who unknowingly gave me the greatest gift of my life. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. If you want to see him, then we'll receive him together. When Frederick Winters arrived at the Double B 3 days later, he found not the struggling ranch he might have expected, but a thriving enterprise. Cole and Josephine greeted him together on the front porch, their 3 children lined up beside them, James tall and confident, Elizabeth graceful and poised, William with his father's easy charm. Frederick, now portly and balding, seemed taken aback by the sight. "Josephine," he said, removing his hat, you look wonderful." His eyes darted to Cole, then back to Josephine. "And this must be your family." "Yes," Josephine said simply, feeling Cole's hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "This is my family." They invited Frederick to stay for dinner, during which he regaled them with tales of his various business ventures, most of which seemed to have ended poorly. His current wife, he explained, was visiting her sister in Sacramento. "And what of you?" he asked eventually, his curiosity evident. "I understand the Blackburn Ranch is quite successful. We've been blessed," Cole acknowledged modestly. "Good land, hard work, and the right partner make all the difference." Frederick's eyes lingered on Josephine. "Yes, I suppose they do." A hint of regret colored his words. After dinner, as Frederick prepared to depart, he paused beside Josephine on the porch. "I made a terrible mistake," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I've regretted it many times over the years." Josephine looked at him with genuine compassion but no regret of her own. "Everything worked out exactly as it should have, Frederick. I wish you well." As they watched him ride away, Cole slipped his arm around Josephine's waist. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her heart full. "Not a single one." "Everything, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, the fear, it all led me here, to you, to our children, to this life we've built together." Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a kiss to his lips. "You were right all those years ago, Cole. We did build dreams together, better than anything I could have imagined." Cole's eyes, still that same striking blue that had captivated her from the beginning, crinkled at the corners as he smiled down at her. "And we're not finished yet, Mrs. Blackburn, not by a long shot." As the years continued to pass, the Blackburn family marked the milestones that make up a full and happy life. James married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, bringing fresh energy and ideas to the Double B. Elizabeth went to college in San Francisco, as she dreamed, returning with a teaching degree and a quiet, scholarly husband who wrote for agricultural journals. William, after several years of wanderlust that took him as far as Colorado, came home at 25, ready to put down roots on the land that had always called to him. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house once more with the patter of small feet and childish laughter. Cole, whose hair had turned completely silver, proved to be an indulgent grandfather, teaching each child to ride as soon as they could sit up straight. "You're spoiling them," Josephine would scold without heat, just as she had once teased him about their own children. "That's what grandparents are for," he would reply with a wink, slipping the little ones sugar cubes to feed to the horses. On their 40th anniversary, with their children, grandchildren, and many friends gathered at the ranch for a celebration, Cole pulled Josephine aside for a private moment. 40 years, he marveled, holding her hands in his. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach, looking like you'd lost everything. And found everything instead," she finished for him, her eyes soft with memory. At 62, Josephine's chestnut hair was now liberally streaked with gray, and her figure had softened with age and childbearing, but to Cole, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box, similar to the one he'd presented her with on that hilltop 40 years before. Inside was a gold locket, intricately engraved with their initials. "Open it," he urged. Inside were 2 miniature photographs, one of them on their wedding day, young and full of hope, and one taken just last month, their faces lined with the experiences of a lifetime shared. "It's beautiful," Josephine whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I wanted you to have a tangible reminder of our journey," Cole explained, fastening the locket around her neck, "though I know we carry it in our hearts every day." That night, after their guests had departed and their family had retired to their respective homes on the ranch property, Cole and Josephine stood on their veranda, arms around each other as they gazed at the stars, just as they had done countless times over the years. "You know," Cole said thoughtfully, "when I saw you that day in Wasco, something inside me just knew. Even before I learned about Winters's betrayal, before I offered you work at the ranch, something in me recognized you as my future." "I felt it too," Josephine admitted. "Not right away, perhaps I was too hurt and angry. But that day when you helped me with my trunk, there was a moment when our eyes met and I felt safe. For the first time in a very long while, I felt safe." Cole tightened his arm around her, drawing her closer to his side. "You've made my life complete, Josie. Everything I am, everything we've built, it all started with you." "With us," she corrected gently. "It started with us choosing to believe in new beginnings, even when all seemed lost." As they stood together under the vast canopy of stars, the ranch peaceful around them and their legacy secure in the children and grandchildren who would carry on after them, Josephine reflected on the long, winding path that had led her to this place, this man, this life. She had arrived in Wasco with no hope left, a jilted bride with nothing but uncertainty before her. And in the most unexpected way, she had found not just hope, but love, family, purpose, a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have dreamed. "We did build dreams together," she murmured, echoing Cole's words from so long ago. "And they turned out better than either of us could have imagined," Cole replied, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he had shown her for 40 years. In that moment, surrounded by the life they had created together, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that sometimes what appears to be the end of everything is merely the beginning of something far more beautiful than we ever dare to hope.